If this is your first or second time, my name's Adam. I'm the lead pastor here. If you're watching online, hi. It's pretty cool. I got to meet a couple people who watch online sitting over at the cafe, so it's kind of cool meeting some different people. So they're real. We're not pretending to have an online audience. We do actually have one. All right, so I wanted to start this morning by talking about like the different kinds of advice you could get, and I wanted to like rank it on like kind of a sliding scale. So the worst kind of advice you can get maybe on this side, and then the best side. I feel like you guys always get the bad side, so I'm going to give them the bad side today. You guys can be the good side. And always, for me, like the bad kind, you kind of want to lean away from it, and this kind of advice, you want to lean in when someone's giving it, right? So let's start over here, and I'll just share my least favorite kind of advice is unsolicited advice. The people who just insert themselves into your life and decide to tell you how to do something without any permission or request on your part. There's something about it that just rubs me the wrong way. And I've been reflecting on this, like, why do you hate that so much? Why do I hate it when somebody just comes in and says, you know what you should do? Because I always want to interrupt them right when they say that. You know what you should do? Yes. Is this going to stop you if I say that? Like, I always feel that way. I always feel a little bit like I want to kind of retract away. Like I said, kind of want to lean away from it. So one of the reasons, and I know this about myself, I know myself enough to know that this is true, and I don't want to talk about it too much because this sermon's for you, it's not for me, so get out of my business. But one of the reasons I know I don't like unsolicited advice is my pride. I kind of always feel, and it's not necessarily true, but I feel like when the person just comes up and starts just telling me what to do, that like they're patting me on the head at the same time, you know, like you're so dumb you didn't even know you needed advice, like, and I'm gonna give it to you, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I know that's just my insecurities, that's my pride speaking, but that's my least favorite kind of advice. And then maybe just over from that would be somebody who, like I ask for it, but then when they start giving it, I realize they're not as smart as I thought they were. You ever have that where you're like, oh, this person would be good to ask, and then the moment they start speaking, you're like, oh, crap. And then you just have to smile and nod and be like, that's really, yeah, that's deep. Okay, so that's like kind of still frustrating, but at least it was invited. Now, when you kind of come over to this side to advice that I'm somewhat interested in, as I was reflecting on how much I hate unsolicited advice, I will actually tell you I don't hate all of it. If I perceive the person who's giving me unsolicited advice to be, oh man, I'm just like, if you people like are paying attention to the subtext, you're like, man, this guy really has a problem. So like, stop psychoanalyzing me. If I perceive the person giving unsolicited advice to be smarter than me, I may accept it. You're like, wow, you're prideful. I know. But like, and I've had this happen, especially like if it's an expert in their field. If I start talking to somebody and they go, hey, you know what? I actually might lean into that because if I respect like who they are and what they've accomplished in their life, I might accept unsolicited advice, even if it's unsolicited, depending on the person. Does that make sense? Okay, so yeah, I'm prideful. Good, you got the first point of the sermon. And then over from there, as you get this way into advice that I'm really, really interested in is the kind of advice that you ask for, right? Especially from people who are really good at whatever it is, whatever area of life you're asking for, right? So that's really interesting. And then if you could even take it further, you'd like really want to hear from people who are like top of the top in their area, right? So if you like wanted to get into investing and you could get access to like Warren Buffett, you'd love to like give me all the advice because that dude knows what he's doing in that field, right? If you wanted to start like some kind of tech startup, you'd love to talk to Elon Musk, like get advice from him. If you wanted to get into the pop industry, you know, you got to talk to T Swift. She knows what she's doing, right? You got to like that. That's not my thing. That's somebody else's thing. It's not mine. But you'd want those people who are like top of the top in their field giving you advice. And then I would say even above that, where I would really want to lean in is if that kind of person started the sentence with, hey, this is the most important thing. Like if they start with that, they're not just giving you kind of tips and pointers about stuff. If they say, hey, this right here, this is it. You're getting some pen and paper out, right? You're like recording them on your phone like that. That means, okay, the person who's the best in their field telling you the most important thing, that is the best kind of advice that you could ever get. So the story we're gonna look at today, we actually have a guy asking a question who's already an expert, and he is watching Jesus have some interactions, and he doesn't know who Jesus is yet, but he's intrigued enough that he wants to hear what Jesus has to say, and he actually asks Jesus, hey, what's like the most important thing spiritually? He asked Jesus that question. Now that's crazy that we get to be like a fly on the wall and actually watch this interaction take place because you're talking about Jesus. This is the most important person telling us the most important thing, right? This is God in the flesh telling us, hey, this is the greatest thing when it comes to your spiritual life. This is it. I want to lean all the way in because Jesus doesn't even really fit on the sliding scale, right? Because he's not an expert. He's not like one of those guys who's read all the books. He wrote the book, right? Like this is straight from the source getting asked, hey, what's the most important thing spiritually? And now Jesus is going to tell us the answer to that question. You really, really want to know what he has to say here. So the story's found in Matthew 22. It's also found in Mark, but we're going to look at the Matthew one. Matthew 22, starting verse 36, here's the question. This is what the religious expert asks Jesus. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Which is essentially saying, hey, what's the most important thing spiritually speaking, right? What's the greatest of all the commands? What's the great command? And that's the name of our sermon series is Great. It's this Greek word, megos. We see it all over the New Testament. This is one of the places that it pops up, and it's just so cool. What is the megos command, the biggest, the most important, the primary, the pivotal command of all the commands? What is it, Jesus? What's the one thing? Pause. What do you think he's going to say? I know you're a good Christian. You already know what he's going to say because you have that memorized. I guess if you've been a Christian for a while, I do hope you know what he says here, or at least have an idea. But if I said, let's pretend you don't know. If I said, based off of how Christians act today, what would you say he's about to say? If I said, based off of the things that Christians emphasize, what would you say Jesus is about to lay on us here? What would you say? This is an embarrassing thing to think about, isn't it? If you call yourself a Christian, what is the thing that we're talking about all the time? If you just got a feel for what you sense out in the world, if they follow Jesus, this must be the thing that Jesus says is the most important thing. Like, what would it be? Like, you better get sex right? Don't do that, definitely don't do that. Is that what he's about to say? It's not. Oh, you better give money to the church. You give it to the church. Is that what he said? You better not let them liberals take over the country that didn't exist when he said the command, right? You better tell people the truth in kind of a mean way all the time and call it loving, right? Did I hit everybody? This is supposed to be open season on everyone. I was trying to hit everyone, no? So what does he say? Verse 37, most important thing, Jesus, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Peak of the peak. Jesus, what's the most important thing? Love God. Love God. And then he elaborates a little bit, right, with your heart and your soul and your mind. And you could divide that up however you want, right? You could lay it out and say, hey, okay, your heart is your emotions, the soul is like the deepest part of your spiritual being, and then the mind is, your thoughts and stuff. You could try to talk about the different ways that works out, but I think what Jesus is trying to say is, you're supposed to love God with all of you. All of you. There's not supposed to be any part of you that's held back from this. There's not supposed to be like a percentage like, Jesus, I love you with 95% of me, but this 5 I'm keeping for myself. No part of you are you supposed to hold back. This is with all of your being, with all that you have, you're supposed to love God. Everything you've got. Now, Jesus is awesome because he gives bonus content to this question. You ever have like somebody who's so smart when you ask them a question, they're like, hey, you asked this question, but you should have also asked this question. That's how smart I am. Like they even know the questions you should have asked. That's how Jesus is. So he's like, hey, just so you know, you should have asked also what's the next commandment, because he throws it in verse 29. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. So now he's got these 2 commands that he's putting at the top. He's saying, love God and love others. And I wouldn't say, it's easy, it'd be easy to say like, that's the second greatest commandment, but he didn't talk about it like that. He said equally important. And it's like crazy. I think maybe you call it like your like 1 and 1.5, like it's just right there. I want to put love God for sure, number 1, standalone, but man, this one's just right there underneath it. And I actually think the reason he does this is because these 2 things are attached. Your love of God and your love of people actually are linked in some way. So here's the thing. I started thinking about this, and I was writing my sermon on Thursday, and I was like, okay, so I got to talk about loving God, and I got to talk about loving people, and then I realized that it was going to end up being a 3-hour sermon, and I didn't think you guys would be down for that. So what I decided is I'm gonna split this thing in half and do part 1 and part 2. So this week is the Great Commandment, and next week can be like the Great Commandment 1.5, and we'll do it that way. Okay, so you're welcome. You will not miss lunch today. We're going to focus on the first one, but I want to show you what he says next. So he says, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he says this, verse 30. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based off these 2 commands. So he says everything kind of hangs on these 2 things. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there are 612 laws in the Old Testament, 612. That's a lot, right? So Jesus said, hey, if you put those in a pot and you boil them down, the thing that's going to be left is these 2 things, love God and love people. That's what's going to be left if you boiled everything down to their essence. That's it. Love God and love people. So if you just could get those right, what's your problem? Why can't you just get 2 things right? Just get it together. Just love God and love people. That's it. That's what he's saying. It's just these 2 things. If you get these 2 things right, everything else will fall into place. Love God and love people. So, love God. With all your heart, with all your mind, all your soul. Let's look at that again, though. Verse 37. Can you guys throw verse 37 back up there? So what's he say here? They said, most important thing, you must love God with all your heart, soul, mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. So Jesus here is telling us that love of God is a command. We're commanded to love. You're commanded to. Can I just point something out? That doesn't really fit with the way our culture talks about love, does it? Like to be commanded to love. Like the way our culture talks about love, that sounds wrong, right? Like because we use language when we talk about love like you fell in love. Like you was walking along and there was a ditch and you just fell into it, right? It was like you didn't do it on purpose. It was not an active thing, it was a passive thing that you fell into love. And then strangely, we also talk about falling out of love, which is weird because I don't know how if you fell down into something that you can fall back out of it, did gravity like reverse itself and now you're flying back up out of the pit? I don't understand, but we talk about it and the language has this passivity built into it, right? Like you can't control it. Like love is something that just kind of happens inside of you and you fall into it and you fall out of it and there's almost Nothing that you can do that would control that, right? Isn't that kind of how our culture talks about it? So when Jesus says this, hey, the biggest, the most important, the number one command is to love God. You're commanded to love God. That can kind of feel like, wait a minute, how can you tell me I have, like that's something I'm commanded to do? You're gonna put that on me that now I have to somehow force myself to feel something? Like it doesn't feel right. So first thing, I'll give you can Jesus command us to do something that we can't control? Can he do that? Well, he's God, so yeah, he can do what he wants. But let me give you a short answer and then a longer answer. On one hand, if Jesus said, love God, and it was absolutely something that we had no control over, he could still do it because if you actually read the Gospels, he commanded people to do things that they couldn't do all the time, right? He commanded a blind guy to see. He commanded people who couldn't walk, like legs didn't work. He commanded them to walk. So like Jesus actually does this all the time. He says, hey, do something that's impossible, but I'm gonna help you do it. Like it's through his power, not our power, that it's supposed to be done anyways. So I would say if we had zero control over our love, he could still command this, and then we're just supposed to be able to do it in his power, okay? Now, that sounds cute, and that's really good theology, by the way, but what do you do with that, right? Like, how do you do that? Like, it sounds nice. Hey, Jesus is commanding us to do something impossible, just like a guy whose legs don't work, commanding them to walk. He's telling us to love him, so we're just supposed to do it in his power. You're supposed to walk. You're just supposed to love in his power. And I feel like I've heard sermons like that before. Like I grew up in church, so I heard this kind of stuff a lot. And it was always like, okay, I'm supposed to do that. God is going to help me, and I'm going to do that. And like that would sometimes be like the end of the sermon. It's like, all right. But how? How do we do that? I want to say that I have a problem, and I'm always like a little bit cautious to do this. I don't generally love picking fights with our culture, except for when I'm going to be very careful about it. So like when our culture says that you can't control your feelings, if you fall into love, you fall out of love, and you could say any other kind of feeling, they just happen to you. It's a passive thing that it just kind of pops up, and that you can't do anything about your feelings. I have a little bit of a problem with that. I understand why we think that, but I think it's too simplistic of a view. And I think this is really important. It's actually one of the biggest problems we have going right now. So let me explain. I have a 6-year-old. His name is Zeke. He is so cool. He's one of the coolest humans. For me, top 5. Love him. I won't tell you where in the rankings. Listen, anybody who says they don't have a favorite kid, you're full of crap. You have a favorite. The truth is it changes every day, right? Or every minute, right? It's just whichever one is being the nicest right now or not the meanest, I guess, is or the cutest or whatever. I don't know how you do it, but mine changes constantly. But this dude, he's hilarious, he's clever. For 6 years old, he always surprises me with some of the thoughts he's having. So the other day, we were all leaving the house to go somewhere, like the whole clan. I have 4 kids, so all 4 of us were gonna go somewhere together. And we were doing that parenting thing, that parenting thing you do where you just threaten their lives because you're going into, you're going into public. Is it going into public? It's public. Don't act like fools. Don't act like idiots. And I say all that stuff, and I probably shouldn't. And if you don't, we will take anything that runs on electricity away. We will take electricity away from you. You will go backwards in time into the 18th century. All the threats. So we got to where we were going, and I was helping him out of the van. We're in public now. And he's like, Dad. I'm like, what's up, buddy? He's like, why is the public everywhere? You just feel this weight of having to act right everywhere. And I'm like, as an introvert, I also agree. Why are they always, wherever I go, they're there. It's so crazy. But I love, he's just got these crazy insights into things sometimes. But I will also tell you at other times, he can be a bit dramatic. It's just a little bit. So for example, the other day, he just got into basketball. He just played his first season of basketball this past winter. And so he'd never played before. His older brother plays. His older brother's 12, so his older brother has a bunch of experience, and he's just starting off. So I'm like, all right, we haven't really gone outside and shot as much as we should have. So I'm like, let's go down in the basement. It was cold out. Let's go down in the basement, and we're going to practice dribbling. So he got his basketball. His brother got his basketball, and we were down there. And he'd never done this before. So I'm just like, hey, let's just start by just bounce the ball. We're not even going to get to dribbling. We're just going to bounce it and catch it. And it was rough. It was a rough go, even for that. And his older brother's trying to be encouraging, but I don't know if you have a kid who, I feel like this one, like if you encourage him too much, it actually works the opposite way. Maybe he's like me. He's got that condescended to kind of a thing. Like the moment you're trying to encourage him too much, he just can't handle it. So he's struggling a little bit. He's bouncing the ball. It's bouncing off his foot. It's rolling away. He's not, he's hitting himself in the face a little bit as he's trying to do it. He's just not having it. And I can feel the little tiny volcano that lives inside of him starting to warm up. And he's starting to get angry. And we're trying. And then his older brother shows off a little bit, which is his own thing that he has a problem with sometimes. And then he just explodes. And his big sentence that he said was, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I was like, buddy, that's why we're down here, right? Like that's right. You can't do it. The only way to be able to do it is to do it, right? You got to do it, and in order to learn how to do it better. And the more you intentionally do it, then the more you'll be able to do it in a natural way. So, I feel like sometimes we have the same attitude that my 6-year-old has when it comes to our feelings. We walk into a situation, and if it doesn't immediately just click, if we don't immediately feel it, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. It's just not there. And we act exactly like him. I can't. And you're not wrong, right? You can't. He couldn't dribble. But there's a difference between saying you can't do something, I can't just flick a switch and feel something, and then on the other hand of actually working at it and then doing some things and not doing some things and developing something, right? If he would have kept at it, and he has, he can bounce the ball now. He can get a couple of steps, and then he travels, and then a couple of steps, and then he travels. It's great. He's getting there. But I think what we've done is we act like there's nothing we can do to influence our feelings. That there's no choices we can make that would do something inside of here. And I think that's one of the biggest lies our culture has trying to get us to believe right now, is that our feelings are our masters. And whatever you feel, that is true, and is true for you, and you just need to accept that and follow that, and that's so important, whatever you're feeling right now. So, and I'm not gonna totally diss the idea that feelings lead to actions. And they do, right? Your feelings lead you to act a certain way. I'll ask your spouse. Your feelings may cause you to act a certain way. You know that. But I also want to propose that your actions can produce feelings, that it actually goes both ways, and that we totally as a culture have completely said no to that, or we're ignoring it, we're acting like it doesn't exist. But we gotta be, listen, Christians, we gotta be a little bit different here. We gotta think a little bit different. You are not a slave to your feelings. You cannot walk into a room and go, I can't. You can't do that. You have to acknowledge that actually your actions can influence your feelings, and no, it doesn't happen overnight, does it? It's not some immediate, I flip a switch and now I just love God with all my heart and my mind and my soul, and I just did it. No, but the more you bounce the ball, the better you'll get at it, and the more it will increase. Check out this verse in Proverbs. It's so important. Proverbs 4:23 says this, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Keep your heart because what comes out of it is like light, like your life comes out of it. All that is you comes out of your heart. Now that's interesting because now other translations say to guard your heart, and I like that. Like you're supposed to guard it. You're supposed to guard your heart. But if you're like really look at what it's saying, you guard your heart. Why? Because of what comes out of it is so important. So it stands to reason then that what you let into your heart is going to affect what comes out of it, right? Because why guard it? Why would you have to guard? If what goes into your heart doesn't affect what comes out of your heart, then let it fly. You don't have to guard nothing. You just let it go and it'll, whatever happens, happens. And no, but this verse says you're supposed to guard your heart because what you allow into your heart is going to affect what comes out of your heart. That means you do have some influence over this. You can in some way over time control some of what's going on in your heart based off of what you allow into it. That's really, really important. That over time you can actually change some of the feelings that you have. So let's use fire as an example. Let's say you wanted to make s'mores. It's s'more season. I love and hate s'mores because I'm a parent. Isn't that like true of everything now? Anything that used to be fun, I also hate it because it's just so we have graham crackers, chocolate, marshmallows, and baby whites. Like they all go together now for us. Let's say you went outside into your backyard and said, it's s'more time, let's go. I can't make a fire. And if you stood there, now for some of you, you have the tool to make a fire and we won't judge you. You have it right now on you for whatever reason. Maybe you have it, whatever, that's fine, it's you. But for the rest of us, you don't have any way to do it. And you could just be like, I can't. No fire, I can't do it. Unless you're a wizard, right? Like if you just spark something because you have magic, but you're not. So like you would have to then do something, right? If you wanted a fire, you'd have to do something. You'd have to actually make some choices and go like, okay, I gotta go get the lighter, I gotta go get the matches, I gotta go get some kindling, some sticks, some logs, and I gotta actually do some things that will create an environment that is conducive for fire to exist, and then I have to make a choice to do something that's gonna light that thing, right? So you can't just say I can't. You had to do a bunch of stuff to create all that. Now, you could also make choices that would hinder your ability to make a fire, right? You could like light a match and go, that's weird. Like, and you could be like, I don't understand why it's not working. Well, it's because some of your actions are causing it. Or you could take a big bucket of water and pour it on there, and then you could throw matches on it all day long, and you'd be like, I don't know what's going on. This fire just won't light. But you're smart enough to know that it was your choices and your actions that created this situation where fire's not going to burn. Your love of God's the same way. Your love of God's the same way. It's what are you putting in here? What are you doing here? What are the choices you're making over time? Is it creating an environment where this fire can burn? Or are you making choices that are going to prevent it from burning or quench it if it already is burning? So here's what I want to do. I want to be super, super practical. I want to give you some things that will ignite a passion for God, and I want to give you some things that will squish your passion for God, that will quench your passion from God. It's just, I'll just be honest, this is kind of a list, like I feel like I'll just use myself as a guinea pig. This is the way it works in my life. I will start with the negatives, and I'll start with the super most obvious one. If you want to prevent the love of God in your life, you want to squash the love of God in your life, you want to shrink the love of God in your life, sin. And I mean, everybody sins. We all do. And so let me be specific about this one. It's not just, I don't mean like the word you say when you hit your thumb with the hammer, right? I don't mean that. I don't even mean like somebody cuts you off and you tell them they're number one as they drive by you. Those are the kind of things that just kind of come out of you, and that's something that the God will continue to get a hold of in your life as you continue to grow as a Christian. I'm not even gonna look at some of you. I have to like avoid eye contact. I'm more talking about when it comes to sin, like that thing that you know you're not supposed to do, but you're choosing. You are ahead of time thinking I'm going to do that thing. with that willful, I know exactly what God wants me to do here, but I'm gonna do something else, like that kind of a thing, especially over an extended period of time where you keep saying, I know God doesn't want me to do it, but I'm gonna keep doing it. I know God doesn't want me to do it, I'm gonna keep doing it. That kind of thing, it's like pouring a bucket of water on that fire and going, I don't know why I don't feel this love for God. You're killing it. You're killing it. Willful, repetitive sin will just destroy your love for God. Don't be surprised. Don't act like, I just don't know why I'm not feeling it anymore. Dude, come on. It would really be the same as if me and you were standing there and you just kept pouring buckets of water on some wood and going, I don't know why I can't get this fire started. I'm gonna be like, dude, there's an obvious choice you're making here that is causing that. You gotta make the connection. Don't act like I can't control my feelings. There's some things you're doing that are influencing that. Sin, willful, specifically the willful repetitive, that'll kill it. Second thing, bitterness. Specifically, listen, Christian, bitterness. Bitterness will hurt your love for God. If you are holding on to some things that people have done to you inside of you and you won't let go of it, and listen, and I'm not minimizing what's been done to you. You could have had some really horrible things happen to you, but if you're holding on to them and you're refusing forgiveness as a Christian, it's gonna kill your relationship with God. Because forgiven people forgive. And I look at that as like you're a conduit. You can't block up forgiveness going out and expect the love of God and all the God stuff to keep flowing down. If you're holding on to something, you got to let it go. And that's a choice. You can choose, I'm going to forgive, and then the next morning when you wake up and it's back, you got to choose again. You got to choose again. You got to choose again. But don't hold on to something. Don't hold on to bitterness. Don't let bitterness grow in your heart and then wonder why your love for God is getting smaller. Bitterness will kill it. Third thing. Worry. Worry will shrink your love for God. That's a sermon. Just literally 2 sentences. It's a sermon in of itself. But I'll just point out that if you allow yourself to focus on the negative what ifs of your life, it's going to hurt your relationship with God. If you dwell, and just think about it, just think about the totality of your thoughts. What percentage of them are spent on negative what ifs? What percentage of them are spent on, oh no, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Just that time alone, you know you're not spending it on growing closer to God. And by the way, we have lots of Bible stories of negative what ifs that definitely cause people to there's distance between them and God. Because look at the people of Israel when they enter the promised land, the first time they send the spies in, they what if it to death, right? Oh, well, what if the giants and what if the walled cities and what? And God's like, I told you to do that. And now you've worried your way out of it. You worried your way away from me. So worry, by the way, you replace worry with prayer. Because God is all powerful and he can actually do something about the thing you're worrying about, unlike you. So you take it to him. And through prayer, worry can be replaced with faith. And that's not a switch either. But like I said, that's a whole sermon in and of itself. Last thing that'll quench your love for God is, we'll just call it anything you allow to become more important than God. Anything in your life that you allow to be elevated to above God. The dangerous part about this one is that it can be good things. It's not as obvious as some sin. It's more you've just allowed a good thing to become a God thing, and that's a bad thing. So if you allow some things in your life to get too important, it can be a relationship, it can be a career, it can be even something as stupid as a hobby that becomes more important than God. Your love for God does not grow in the shadow of your idol. It doesn't. So those are our love for God killers. Those are passion killers with God. Let me switch over. And again, this is like things that are really important for me. Number one, if I want to grow my relationship with God, if I want to grow my love for God, for me, prayer, duh, but I don't just mean like the little, hey, I need your help here. Hey, help me not to say something dumb in this meeting. Hey, give me wisdom here. I mean extended time in prayer. And for me, I have to be moving, so it has to be outside. I think I've told you guys before, I have to be out in nature and I have to be walking, and I usually have to actually be able to pray out loud. If I have extended time, extended unbroken time of prayer with God, that grows my love for him. It does. And think about it, you already know this, right? If you have a relationship with someone, you have two kinds of communication, right? It's a little text here and there. Hey, hi, how are you? What are you doing? How was your day? But you also have those times where you need to have extended, unbroken conversations, right? Both are important. So you need to have both kinds of prayer. Little touches here and there, and some extended periods where you're just with him. That will grow. That's like putting logs on the fire. Second thing for me that's really important to grow my love for God is remembering. Remembering. And again, I'll use my my relationship with my wife as an example. And you've probably had this, right? With some of you, if you have someone you love and you sit down and you just start reminiscing, like of all the, remember that, remember this, remember that. Don't you feel in those things that something happens inside of you? Like you have your love for them, and looking back on your life with them grows. It's the same way with God. For me, I have certain times of year where I am intentionally gonna look back and say, wow, look at what you've done in my life. Look at this, and look how faithful you've been, and look at this good thing. Look at this thing that I had no idea how it was gonna turn out, and you came through like that. When I reflect back on those things, my love for him just grows and grows and grows. Remember. Take some time to remember how much God has moved in your life. Third thing, and this one's a little counterintuitive, obey God when you don't want to. This is the opposite of willful sin. This is willful, I'm gonna do it even though I don't really want to, God. There's something that happens. God absolutely loves that. When you say, I don't want to, I have no desire, I don't even understand why you're wanting me to do this, but I'm gonna do it anyways. I'm telling you, something spiritual just ignites inside of you when you do that. Two more. Say this one, I'm biased. Church grows your love for God. Being around other people who believe the same as you, want the same as you, other people who are lifting him high. Even if you don't have it in you to sing in the morning, if you're watching, man, I'll tell you what, watching our worship leader, Jonathan Swaney, jump around up here, that grows my love for God. He's a little weird, but that grows my love for God. I love that. I love seeing my passion grows seeing his passion. And I think that's the way it's supposed to work. That when I'm around people who are passionate and love God, that's gonna increase mine. So that's why church is so important. You gotta be around people who got that fire stoked and going, and yours will ignite too. That's the way it works. And then the last thing that I'll suggest that's big. If you wanna grow your love for God, you need a cause to fight for. A cause to fight for. A mission, a purpose that is bigger than you, that finds its origins in God. Knowing down in your soul that he created you on purpose for a purpose, that he has you here for a reason, that if you're not dead, he's not done, that there's something on this earth that he has for you to do. Man, and it has to be bigger than you. You have to walk up and have to look up to see it when you're close to it. That will ignite your love for God, because in those moments you know you can't do it on your own. You need him. You need him. And there's something about that. And this is when it clicks, people, because like the moment you realize your life isn't about you, and I know that's weird to say, but when you take your spotlight off of you, something happens. And now you need to know this. If you've been living your life and you've just been trying to find things that make you happy, and you've been the center of your life, try to be honest right now. If that's really where you're at, and you're sitting there going, I don't feel like it's working, I wanna say, well, the reason it's not working is because you weren't created for all that. You weren't created for you to be the center of your universe. You were created for God to be the center of your universe, and that's why it's not working. When you sit at the center of your universe, when you're asking, what makes me happy, what's gonna fulfill me, you gotta ask a different question. God has to be at the center, then it will click. So I was reflecting on this command, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. I was thinking, this is actually, it's kind of the opposite of the way we think about it. That would be like God commanding a bird to fly, or God commanding a fish to swim, or God commanding a cheetah to run. He's commanding it to do the thing it was created to do. It's actually very good. And it's not, and by the way, that really makes it, because at first you're like, oh, he's commanding me to love him? Like, gosh, what is up with that? No. When he makes a cheetah fast and says run, when he makes a fish built for water and says swim, when he gives a bird wings and says fly, that's not selfish. That's, hey, this is how I created you to work. Do it. So he's inviting you in when he says, no, listen, the most important thing with your life is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. He's saying, hey, that's why I created you. That's the thing. That is the air underneath your wings. That's it. So worship team, why don't you guys come back up? So here, I want to give you a possible practical step. If you walk out that hallway over there, you see a bunch of these cards hanging on the wall with people's names on them. Beginning of this year, we did a sermon series called First and Best, and we asked people like, hey, let's commit this year to giving Jesus our first and best, because he is first, he is best. Let's give him our first and best as a response to that. I want to bring this back and say, and for some of you weren't here, but I look at something like this, signing this card and saying, hey, I'm going to make a choice here to put him first, to put him best. I feel like God can do something with that. Because by the way, the beginning of anything is a choice. You have that dignity right now. You can choose to say, you know what? I want to do that thing. Jesus said that's the most important thing. Love God, heart, mind, and soul. Make a choice. I think he honors this when you do something like taking a card and writing your name on it and saying, I'm going to do this. And we hang it up out there. And I think it's a little symbol of something. You take a step, you don't just make a decision, but you actually do something that God can do something with that. So maybe that's yours today. Pray with me. Jesus, oh Lord, help us to see it the right way. Help us to see this command like telling a bird to fly, telling a fish to swim, telling a cheetah to run. Lord, I beg you, help that to be crystallized in our soul, that we would see that when you command us to love you, you're commanding us to do the thing we're created to do. And that we're supposed to spend our life doing it. It will be the most fulfilling, best life that we could live. Lord, I pray for the person right now who's hurting. Maybe they need to make a choice to come back to you, to surrender some area of their life to you, to throw some logs on that fire. Lord, I pray for them right now, that you would spark it, that you would do the thing that you do. You loved us first. Help us to love in response. In Jesus' name.